Okay, shall we kick off? Hi everybody, thank you for joining us, all of our SAS-SEG members and anybody who's joining us from Bridge the Gap today. So this will be the first in a series of talks that we're hoping to run between now and the end of the year, given by industry professionals focusing on careers in economic geology. So it's obviously quite difficult to host live events at the moment, so we're hoping that we'll run these virtual talks by industry experts instead. So our first talk today is going to be given by Richard Montjoy. He's the Technical Director at Umbono Natural Resources here in Johannesburg. And he's going to talk to us about project management for geologists. So Richard is a genuine expert in project management. He holds an MSc in economic geology from the University of the Witwatersrand. He's been involved in several greenfield and brownfield exploration programs in South Africa and Northern Canada. And he's worked with a diverse range of commodities, including platinum group elements, coal bed methane, zinc, and gold exploration projects. So Richard was the project manager for the 50 million ounce Lesego platinum project, which was advanced from an inferred resource to a completed feasibility study with a proven and probable reserves on time and on budget. And Richard was responsible for managing all aspects of that program, from exploration program design to various licensing applications. So Richard, thank you very much for joining us today. We're really looking forward to the talk. And at the end of the talk, we're going to hold an informal question and answer session as well for anybody to ask any questions on aspects of the presentation or other aspects of economic geology that they'd like to. So Richard, thank you very much. Over to you. If you'd like to start when you're ready, please. Thanks.
Awesome. Thanks, Tom, and thanks to the SAS-SEG committee for the incredible work you do. And thanks for everyone for joining. It's great to have you guys. So thanks for the opportunity to present. So guys, what I'm going to try just to get across to you today is some aspects of sort of in your careers as geologists. You know, at university, you taught all the usual stuff, mineralogy, ore forming processes, etc., etc. But I just want to get across to you some of the other aspects that we don't necessarily think about as geologists, but it lands on your plate, and you're going to find yourself responsible for these aspects of exploration programs. And unfortunately, it's not always taught in, or certainly wasn't when I was at university. So I just want to start alerting you guys to some of the things you should be aware of, and I find these useful concepts to be aware of in exploration programs. So I think, Tom, we're going to hold questions to the end, just for the smoothness of the talk. So let's, yeah, so on we go. So I think, you know, what's said with many of today's project managers, you don't actually set a career goal to become a project manager. And you may not even find yourself, you know, consider yourself as a project manager, but you actually are a project manager. But, you know, project managers do know that they must successfully manage projects to move ahead in their careers. And I think clearly project management has become a critical skill and not a career choice. You know, you don't leave school thinking, hey, man, I want to be a project manager. Trust me, when as a geologist, you will end up being a project manager, even if it's just managing drill programs, you know, you're managing core yard laborers, etc. So, and you guys already are project managers. You know, if you're given a project, you've got a start date, you've got a scope of work, you've got a finish date, you've got to allocate your resources, be it time, etc., to get the project done and submitted. So, yeah, clearly here's a sort of cartoon is project gone wrong. I think the lady there's calling for, you know, where's the project manager? So what we're going to focus on is project management throughout the mining project lifestyle. So this is a economic geology topic. So we're going to be talking about the application of geological project management to the mining project life cycle. So you guys may not be aware of this, but if we just go through a mining project life cycle, we've got conceptual projects. You know, in other words, what is you know, what is the ore forming genesis? We've conceptually got an idea. We might go stake out some ground and start drilling. And you'll see the project, the value of these projects are typically quite low. Let me just switch this to a laser pointer. So the value of the project's quite low. Pre-discovery, you're drilling around, you're poking in the dirt there, haven't really found anything. And then boom, discovery, the value upswing is enormous. And so this is typically where as geologists we play and we're pretty comfortable with. And then in the mining life cycle, we go into feasibility studies. The mine is actually developed, production ramps up, we go into mining, and then ultimately the mine closes. So that's sort of a general overview of a generic mining project life cycle. So in this stage, we've got exploration project management, concept, pre-discovery, and discovery. Okay, so that's pretty much our bread and butter as exploration geologists. However, you often stay involved in a feasibility project management. So what is a feasibility study? Well, is it feasible and economic to mine this deposit? So you do detailed engineering behind that. But a lot of your work at this stage feeds into this. Then, of course, the mine goes into development, startup, and mining. We're not so much going to focus on this today because this will leave to the mining engineers. This is really, but this is the sort of sweet spot where we play over here on the left-hand side of the screen, and ultimately into closure. So what I want you guys to think about is how to gear up your exploration program to move your resource to a reserve. I'm hoping you're familiar with this table. It's a classic SAMREC JORC resource reserve table. So what we've got is exploration results and an increasing level of confidence, oddly enough, going down, and we move from exploration results into a resource. So as we get more confidence in a resource, we report the mineralization estimates. In other words, how many ounces of gold, how many tons of iron ore, how many tons of coal, etc. And we get increasing confidence from an inferred, indicated to measured. If you guys haven't heard of this before, pay attention. You're definitely going to come across this in your careers going forward. This is the bread and butter of every geologist. So let me reiterate: exploration results, then we move into resources, and inferred, indicated, and measured. So in other words, increasing level of confidence in our resource. And how do we get that? The short answer is by drilling and trenching. Okay. Then I don't know what these red lines are on the screen, so sorry about that. On the going across on the x-axis is a consideration of what we call our modifying factors. Mining, metallurgical, economic, marketing, legal, environmental, social, and governmental factors. And these move our resource, these move our mineral resource from a resource to a reserve. So basically, this is where we start to take into account mining or different economic factors. So for example, if you've got a massive coal mine in the Kruger Park, guys, you might have a resource there, but you'll never mine it. So you can never have a reserve. Okay, another example is you might have a village living on top of your open pittable resource. It's just never, without moving a village or a town, for example, you just can't move from a resource to reserve. Another example is you might be running at 2 grams a ton gold, open pittable. Yes, it is mineable, but if your recovery is only 50%, in other words, it's a metallurgical factor. So whatever reason, you can only recover 50% of the gold. Your effective grade drops from 2 grams down to 1 gram. So this is where we consider the modifying factors, right? And how do we do this? We do what we call a feasibility study. Okay, but now a lot of the work you do here actually feeds into this feasibility study, and you don't always think about it when you just, as geologists, we're just focused on getting to a resource. But what I'm going to show, hopefully show, is the work you do here is directly going to influence these modifying factors. So we spoke about the degree of definition. We spoke about the degree of confidence in our resource: inferred, indicated, and measured. So this is our resource stage, and we've got an associated study stage. Now, get used to these terms. We have a scoping study, a pre-feasibility study, and a feasibility study. Now, you guys would have heard of garbage in, garbage out. You can't feed an inferred resource into a feasibility study because you don't have the level of confidence. At a feasibility study, you've got a team of engineers slaving away in the background, doing detailed engineering design. But if you don't have a high level of confidence in your resource, well, what's the point of doing a feasibility study on it? So you need to make sure that your resource moves along at the same stage to your study. So typically, you can't do a scoping study on a discovery because you don't have any idea of the quantity of ore in the ground. So you typically get it's an inferred resource, do a scoping study, then do an indicated resource, do a pre-feasibility study, and then get some of that resource into a measured category to the feasibility study. So I've tried to depict this on this graph. So this orange line is your level of confidence in your geology. You can see you got a very high level of confidence in geology when you get to pre-feasibility study. Following behind that is your level of confidence in your mining design. And then following behind that is your project execution. And here you're really going into your project is now really getting underway. And you are almost ready to go into construction. Okay, so we've introduced the terms scoping study, pre-feasibility study, and feasibility study. We've also discussed inferred resource, indicated resource, and measured resource. Okay, so here's some high-level concepts to understand. A scoping study is determine what it could be. So if you've got, let's just say you've got 50,000 ounces of gold in remote, in the remote Arctic, guys, you're probably not going to have a mine there. You need a monster resource, right? So basically, this is a back of the envelope calculation. You know, determine what it could be. And then what I've also brought into the slide is your level of licensing associated with it. And this is a big deal now, especially in South Africa. Okay, so typically a scoping study, you've got a prospecting right, you start it, and you've got an inferred resource. So basically you develop the concept. Does it make economic sense? And here you define the next stage of study. Okay, so basically, do we have a project? Yes, we move on to the next stage. So typically we do more drilling. And now to get it to an indicated resource. Now we have to determine what it should be. In other words, a pre-feasibility study is actually an enormous amount of work because you're now looking at different options. So we're looking at different cases, and that's what I've tried to display here. We're weighing up case A versus case B versus case C, D, and E. So you're doing a lot of different cases. Should we mine it underground? Should we mine it open pit? If it's underground, do we conventional, trackless mining, etc., etc. So in order to make these decisions, we need to have a good idea of what our resource is. So a high level of confidence in a resource. And basically at a pre-feasibility study, you want to maximize your NPV and your IRR, which is your net present value and your internal rate of return. In other words, what are the economics of this project? So this is where it gets into really interesting stuff. Guys, this is the heart of economic geology. What are the actual economics of the project? Does it make money? That's why we're here. We're not here to waste shareholders' cash. And on the other hand, you also need to strive for possibly a lowest capital option. So you're starting to understand in a pre-feasibility study the various options, and you take one of these options moving forward and move into a feasibility study. So here you've selected one option, go forward. That's what that little line at the bottom there goes. Go forward, and we do a really, really detailed engineering, 80, 90% detail. Is it viable? Investor review, and we do a final investment decision to proceed with the project. So typically you do that on the back of a measured resource. You want your measured resource to pay back your capital. You don't want to be wasting shareholders' money, and shareholders want confidence that they're going to get their money back if they invest in building a new mine. So just to reiterate, we've gone from determine what it could be to determine what it should be, determine what it will be. Okay, so we've got one option, and at this stage, typically put in your mining right application. So moving from a prospecting route into a mining route. And obviously, when you go into implementation, you've got to have a mining route. So you've got construct the project, commission, operate, rehabilitate, and then its closure, and ultimately get a closure certificate there and return to the community. Okay, so these are basically here you're spending a lot of money, spending an awful lot of money on the construction of the project, and when you're mining, hopefully if you've done your job correctly here, you're extracting the value. And at the end of the day, you've got to return it to the community, return the land to the community, and hopefully leave the community in a better state in which you found it. Okay, so some of the things to think about in your feasibility study project management, and what is relevant to us. Well, we've got our modifying factors, which we discussed earlier. We've got a resource, geotechnical, mine design criteria, a production profile, metallurgical, process plant, waste, infrastructure, marketing, legal, environmental, and social. Guys, so many of the things are playing into our everyday lives now. Certainly, for example, social, we saw that with Marikana. Okay, so what spaces will we play in? Well, we certainly play in the resource space. And under the different stages here, we've got a discovery. So going across this table to the right, we've got exploration, discovery, scoping study, pre-feasibility study, and feasibility study. So these all should be terms that you're now familiar with. And at exploration, we've got an exploration model. Guys, your exploration model is what you study at university, and what you understand. You know, what are the ore forming processes, and do you have the right ingredients to form a ore body in that particular geological terrain? After discovery, we've got a target resource. Then we obviously go into inferred resource, by further drilling, indicated resource, and measured resource. So a resource moves from discovery, and at this stage, we want to look at the resource variability after discovery. And then we want to go, so in other words, how variable is your mineralization? Is your mineralization nice and constant, like a coal seam, where you can drill it out at 250 meters or 500 meters, even a kilometer, and get to some sort of resource? Or is it extremely nuggety? Is it extremely variable? And this is all important, because to understand that variability means how much drilling do we have to do to get to an inferred resource? The more variable the resource, the more variable the mineralization, the more drilling you've got to do to move across from inferred resource to indicated resource to measured resource. I hope that's making sense. Now, the other thing is that when it comes to a resource, the definition of, you guys have all heard of SAMREC. SAMREC defines a resource as what can reasonably be expected to be mined. You can't go and mine a 20 centimeter thick reef, not underground and not easily on surface. So you need to do what we call a reef cut definition. So guys, what is the minimum thickness of gold we can mine underground on the Wits? The VCR, for example, the Venstop contact reef, is about 20 centimeters thick, but we physically cannot get a person or machine in a 20 centimeter thick reef. So we need to define a reef cut and adjust our resource accordingly. So again, a geologist is playing a key role in here. Okay. Then when you move from, staying on the resource, when you move from a indicated resource to a measured resource, how much of that resource is going to convert to a reserve? And how much of that is going to contribute towards the capital payback of sinking a mine, of starting a mine? This is really important. I mean, if you sink, to give you guys some numbers, if you sink a mine shaft today, a typical rule of thumb for mine shaft is about R1 million per meter. So if you're going to go down, look, we can mine at 2 kilometers deep, no problem. But that's 2 billion rand to sink a shaft. And it's going to, on average, you're going to advance a shaft a meter per day. It's going to take you 2 years, 2,000 days to sink a 2 kilometer deep shaft. So you can see the real economics of your resource having a real effect on the economics. Another important aspect that's often overlooked is the geotechnical aspect. You know, we're all very good at spotting mineralization. What we're not so good at, or certainly I'm not so good at, is understanding the impact of joints, fractures, rock quality densities, etc., on that you pick up in the core on your mine. So basically, your geotech and your mine and your reef cut feed into your mine design criteria. So these are all important aspects that you need to consider when designing your exploration program. Keep time and money and budget aside for geotechnical work. And at all stages, discovery, scoping study, and pre-feasibility study, you do geotech work, both on your core and even on surface as well, for your foundations, etc. Then we hand it over to the mining engineer, mine design criteria. So this is typically at an inferred resource stage. We just benchmark. What is let's just say we're looking at an underground Wits mine. We wouldn't go into detailed mine design. We would just benchmark against how our neighbors do it. So in other words, we're not invoking expensive engineers now. You're going to do the work, and you're going to say, okay, listen, South Deep, they're mining using a trackless mine. We've got a similar reef. We understand our reef cuts, and we're going to benchmark it against what our neighbors are doing. When we go into pre-feasibility studies, we're now doing mine design criteria trade-off studies. This is what I discussed earlier. We were looking at those different options. Let's stick with the gold example. You might do mechanized mining versus conventional mining. You're going to look at your aspects of labor. Is there labor available? The cost of labor? Is it safe? Etc. etc. So these are all your mine design criteria that you look at during a pre-feasibility study. You select one option and take that forward into a feasibility study. From your mine design criteria, you produce a production profile. In other words, how much ore is going to be mined every month or every year, how much waste is going to be mined, and you use that to calculate your revenue, and that goes into a financial model. Another thing that's often forgotten about is the metallurgical. Guys, when you're doing drilling, a lot of the projects look at now underground, and you've got to understand how does the ore behave in a process plant. I discussed recovery earlier. Make sure that you've got sufficient material to send to Mintech or SGS or one of the laboratories to do metallurgical test work on. So, and these laboratories are notoriously hungry for material. So this is always an issue. You need to apply your mind to geometallurgy. And how does the ore respond metallurgically? And this is all linked again to the geology. Metallurgists, with all due respect, are notoriously poor at understanding ore deposits, and that's fair enough because it's not their core strength. What geologists have the edge over metallurgists in that we understand ore deposits, but we also understand mineralogy. So understand how your mineralogical compositions affect your metallurgical response. So again, your geology is playing into your metallurgy over here. And these are all aspects of geological project management that people often neglect. Your metallurgical test work will feed into your process plant design. We're also going to produce waste, and we're going to need infrastructure. We're going to need marketing. So in other words, take PGMs, for example, or nickel. What are your first question when you make a discovery is, guys, well, what are the long-term outlooks? What metal price forecasts are you using? And bizarrely enough, this often lands on the geologist's desk. So if we look at case in point would be the clean energy revolution and the battery revolution. So we're moving away from fossil fuels into renewables. Renewables require batteries. We've seen the rise of Elon Musk and Tesla, and we've seen the demand for nickel, and not just any nickel, but what we call class 1 sulfide nickel deposits, not nickel laterites, nickel sulfides. So again, your marketing is having an influence on your exploration model. If Elon Musk wants nickel sulfide to feed into Tesla, we're not going to go find nickel laterite deposits. We want to be looking for nickel sulfide deposits. So believe it or not, there's another aspect of project management that plays into the geological role. Then you've got a legal aspect. So we discussed earlier prospecting rights, converting your prospecting rights to mining rights. Guys, there's a huge geological role that gets played in, first of all, in maintenance of your prospecting rights and conversion of your prospecting rights to a mining right application and ultimately a mining rights. So you would do well to take every opportunity to learn about mineral legislation in South Africa. As a geologist, it's going to, trust me, it's going to play a huge role in your careers going forward. Then we've got environmental issues that we need to consider. Guys, right now, when you put in a prospecting rights application, it's going to cost you a couple of R100,000 to do environmental impact assessments. So you need to have a good idea of what the environmental issues are, even at a prospecting right stage. Never mind when you're trying to take your project through to a mining right. So basically, you need environmental impact assessments. So you need a pre-feasibility study for your environmental impact assessments for your mining right application. So here's something no one ever thinks about. In order to convert your prospecting rights to a mining right, you need to do a detailed environmental impact assessment. But you can't do that unless you've got a pre-feasibility study, because that's a level of engineering. So that feeds back to, you need an indicated resource. So it's all, this is the baseline of moving a project from exploration into extraction the value through a mining, ultimately through mining. Now, this is becoming bigger and bigger on the radar, is your social, and we talk about a social license to operate. Guys, as a geologist, you unfortunately are the first guys in the field, guys and girls, and you're on the front line with the community. You need to manage your community expectations. You need to manage access agreements. You need to scope out the community issues. And trust me, you will be the ones called to the community meetings, because the community will rock up at the drill rig, wanting to know what's happening, when's the mine going into development, why aren't you employing more local people, why did these guys get fired, etc., etc. The drillers don't deal with it. You deal with it because you're the project geologist. And ultimately, right at this, engaging with the community at this early exploration stage, ultimately the idea is to get the community on board and supportive of your project. Okay, so basically this is the concept of moving by doing all these detailed studies and engaging with the engineers and the various stakeholders in these processes, we move from a resource into a reserve. And on the back of that, we do what's called a financial model, and this shows the economic viability. Financial model, I remember when I started working, I first came across a financial model, and it was talk about, guys, I said, what's a financial model? In simple terms, it's a basically you calculate how much ore you're going to mine every month or year, sorry, let me turn this phone off. How much ore you're going to mine every year, and how much it's going to cost to mine, and basically, is it economically viable? And the sooner you get to grips with this, the better. So basically, at every stage in this process, well, do we have an economically viable project? Because as soon as you don't, then you're just wasting shareholders' resources. And if you don't believe you've got an economically viable project in the future, in other words, if your marketing, if the outlook for metals is poor, so let me ask you a question. Do you guys think, I don't have to answer it, but do you guys think exploring for coal, for example, is a good idea? You know, would you go explore for coal in Europe, for example, or North America? So just think about that, you know. So as a project manager, a project geologist, we need to plan to work through the process. So you've got this process in mind. We're moving from, and it logically follows these steps. So we go from defining a resource. While we're doing that, we define the geotechnical aspects of the project. So you would typically get a geotechnician on site. He needs to do that. So the first step, understand your resource. How does the resource behave? What are the geotechnical aspects of the resource? Once you've got that, the mine engineer can do his mine design criteria. Once you've got the mine design criteria, you can then produce production profile. So what does this mean? Well, guys, your mine design criteria would be, for example, if you guys have been underground, we've got a stope, and the maximum stope width can only be 20 meters due to the geotech. So we need X amount of stopes. And X amount of stopes can only produce so much ore. So therefore, that feeds into your production profile. And so you work your way through the chain. Once you've got your production profile, you know what ore you're producing, how much waste is coming out of it, how much dilution. You can start to do metallurgical test work on a representative sample. This is another great example of what mine engineers don't understand. Is, guys, what is a representative sample? Engineers don't understand sampling. Geologists do, because we're scientists. Okay, so again, this falls in your role. At this stage where you've defined a resource, make sure you define what is a representative sample, and of what will be mined. Then you can do your metallurgical test work. The process engineers can design a process plant. We will then understand what the waste is, both in terms of tailings and in terms of waste rock dump. We then understand what infrastructure is required. Where does the tailings go? Where does the waste rock dump go? Where are stockpiles? We now know how much ore we're going to produce, and the quality of the ore, and we need to market the ore. Again, let's go back to the coal example. Guys, if we're going to have a hard time selling coal to Europe or to the USA, because it's just not environmentally friendly. So again, what is your marketing? Take PGEs, for example. PGE is much easier market to actually sell PGEs into the renewable space, or nickel. Legal aspect of things, you know, how do we convert our prospecting right to a mining right? And we need to understand all these aspects of converting our prospecting right to mining right, because we've got what's called a mine works program. And again, that feeds into our environmental EIAs and ultimately into our social. How many people are we going to employ? Where are we going to get people from? It's which communities? What are communities like? Are they hostile? Are they receptive to a mine, etc., etc.? Okay, so let's go through our resource to reserve. So the resource, what you need before you can move to the next step is a geological block model is essential. So guys, this is something that you do in Datamine, in Leapfrog. You guys can probably know it better than me. So you need to produce your geological block model. This is definitely the role of a geologist, or typically a resource geologist. Make sure that you've got sufficient material for your geotechnical test work. So, sorry guys, in a second. Yeah, make sure you've got sufficient material for your geotechnical test work. These guys will destroy your core. They'll send it off to a lab. They'll do uniaxial compressive tests, triaxial compressive tests, and you get it back in a bag of pulp. So make sure that you've got that material planned for. Make sure you've got sufficient geotechnical test work to allow for proper mine design criteria. This is important. Once you've got the mine design criteria, we can produce our production profile, and that ultimately drives our feasibility costing. And I've touched on this already. Ensure that we've got sufficient material and time for metallurgical test work. Your recovery plays a major role in project economics. So make sure that your sample that you send to Mintech or whatever your lab is representative of what's going to be mined. That's why you need to understand your mine design criteria. So that sample talks to your mine design criteria. And once you've got that, the process engineers can design a process plant. And this is really, really important because if your recovery drops from 80% to 70%, that's a direct revenue, direct impact on your revenue. So it's really, really very important. And then the other important thing is ensure that you've got availability of material for waste characterization. In South Africa, you need to have a license to deposit waste. Waste is classified as waste rock dump as well as tailings. So make sure that at the back of this process, you've got material that you can send off to the labs to characterize for any harmful leachates, etc., because that's going to feed into your environmental impact assessment. So we touched on marketing. You've got a path to market. We talked about coal, we talked about nickel, we talked about PGEs, and then we talked about commodity price forecasts. So off the cuff, I would say that I think the commodity price forecast for coal is not looking good. For nickel, I think it's looking great. So have a sense of that in your project. On your infrastructure, again, everyone forgets about. Don't forget to do soil geotech. So often you see the guys drill the holes. You've got samples and samples lying on surface. This will get washed away by the rain. And some geotech comes back later and says, "Hey guys, listen, what's the soil like?" And we haven't even looked at the soil because it's not something we're typically interested in. But be aware of that. Okay, on the legal, guys, in South Africa, there's local ownership criteria in Mining Charter 3. Communities need to be involved, BE, Black Economic Empowerment. And again, make sure that you've got sufficient information to convert your prospecting rights to mining rights. And don't forget that your mining application triggers your EIAs. This is a 2-year process. This process needs to start way back. Again, on your social, I mentioned to you guys that your geologist in the front line from day one. So your social license to operate. So be the nice guy on the ground. Okay, and then ultimately this produces a financial model, and every decision has an economic impact on the project viability. Okay, so basically we've got a specific scope, we've got a product, we've got resources and a schedule. So this is the sort of the tripartite alliance in project management. You've got a product which you want to produce. You've got resources. These could be people, funds, drill rigs, laboratory allocations, specialists, permits, etc. You've got a limited amount of time to do this in, and be aware of long lead time items, for example, metallurgical test works, licensing expiring, etc., etc., prospecting rights expiring. And then we discussed your scope. So your desired results of products and activities required. So basically the sufficient level of definition for each stage of the mining cycle. So on a typical project life cycle, this is a generic project life cycle, not related to mining at all. You've got your project initiation, so you define the project. We've got planning, basically detailed planning, project execution, and project closure. So let's take, for example, an assignment that you need to hand in next week. Well, hopefully you've got a project definition from your lecturer, from your professor. You need to plan it. Well, guys, he wants it due in 2 weeks. Okay, well, so my resources, listen, I've got next weekend available, I've got exams, I've got tests, etc. So you do some planning around this, and you need access to the library or journal articles, etc. How are we going to do it? And then so you do some planning in the back of your mind. Then you go into your project execution. Well, you actually sit down, you write the report. Are you on schedule? You completed, you've got a week to do it. 5 days in, you're only 20% of the way in writing the report. So you're monitoring, you're monitoring this report. And well, listen, guys, I've got the weekend to catch up on the 80%. So you need to put in controls, project controls. And basically, project closure, you submit the report, project closed. Well, you typically do a review after the project. You get the report back from your professor. So, sorry guys, you messed it up, you completely misunderstood it, or you neglected to consult this article, etc., etc. So that's your project review. Okay, so I'll just run through this quickly. I'm conscious of time here. So project initiation, a project definition. Basically rough estimates on your budget, your resources, your tasks performed, and your schedule. Okay. So what does that look like? Well, you typically put a schedule. This is a exploration, high-level exploration schedule. We take it in, funny enough, it's in Madagascar. We've got a dry season, we've got a rainy season, and we've got different tasks. So, for example, funding of contracts, prospector right acquisition, GIS database setup, etc., etc. What are these tasks can run in parallel? And target generation. Do we have a decision to proceed? Yes. Move on to the next stage of the project. And here we're actually drilling. Yeah, so drill target definition, and in phase 3, we're drilling. So do we have drill targets? Project review, decision to proceed, yes. So we've got a nicely defined timeline, our resources, and project milestones and reviews. So planning, detailed plan specifying the time required, the desired results, the work required, the cost and the budget, and then the resources required. So this all leads to a project execution plan and associated schedule. Okay, so this is what we call a Gantt chart. I really like doing like this, so it's not very clear on this, but you've got going across, you've got time, and these are different aspects of your project, and when and where are you going to do it. So again, there's our hydrogeology, there's our geotech, resource modeling, and this is out a very real project. Okay, that's just an extension of that Gantt chart. Here is a project budget. So 1 second. So here's a detailed budget. What you can see, these talk to our different aspects of the project. And then going across, this is timeline cash flow. So this is useful to understand when and where you're going to be spending the cash. Project execution, basically establish a team, you put in your support systems, might be a steering committee, client feedback, decision registers, monitoring control, and basically you want to, you could track your revenue, you could track your progress, your actual versus forecast expenditure, etc., and then ultimately your project closure. So assess your project results, obtaining any approvals to go to the next stage, and finally accepted approved forward working plan or project execution plan, and applying the lessons learned from project to similar efforts for the future. So a lot of this stuff happens subconsciously. You know, you learned in first year that you messed up on this this assignment by doing this. You're not going to do it again, and that's basically your project review. Okay, so guys, we almost done here. I just want to cover this concept of front-end loading, and basically this is a term that describes the more effort you put into projects at the start, typically the better the results. There's often a tussle with shareholders here because you don't. This often costs money, but basically what I'm saying is you spend more time and effort into your scoping study, it makes your feasibility study a lot smoother and often cheaper. But it can be hard to motivate for because you don't always know whether you're going to advance to the next stage or not. Okay, so some important aspects of projects is understanding your risks. So I've taken a geological aspect here, and let's just say we look at the bushfire complex. What are some of the risks? Well, safety, community, there's mining risks, marketing risks, capital risks, water risks, electricity risks associated with mining and bushfire complex. Take the Waterberg coal, for example, the Waterberg coal field out near Lepelale. There's different risks, market risks, logistics risks. So evacuating your coal is an issue in Waterberg. Evacuating your PGEs in the bushfire complex is not such an issue. There's definitely water risks there. Coal bed methane, for example. You've got incident affected parties don't want fracking, for example. Farmers, landowners. So you've got different risks with gas price regulations, different risks with different projects. So understanding your risks associated with projects is always useful. This is an example of a a platinum project. In fact, it's the SAS-SEG project. In September 2011, we had defined our resource looking like this. And we had a resource, we had inferred the resource going into 700 meters depth all along strike And we did a full mine design on the back of this. However, we did so pre-feasibility level study was done on the back of this resource. We did more drilling, and it turned out that this, for whatever reason, this area didn't exactly, this area of the resource did not exist. That had a massive impact on the feasibility study, the economics, and the mine design. And huge amounts of man hours were lost. So this is the danger of not fully defining a resource before doing detailed engineering work on it. So basically what I'm saying is there's poor front-end loading of this project. And hopefully I've learned from that in the project review process. So guys, just in closing, to be a better project manager, be a why person. You know, why is it like this? Always ask questions. Be a can-do person. You know, try to see solutions. Think about the bigger picture. What are we trying to achieve here? Think about it in detail. What can trip us up? Make assumptions cautiously. We all need to assume, but be cautious with assumptions. View people as allies, not as adversaries. People are resources, valuable resources. And say what you mean and mean what you say. Respect other people, acknowledge good performance, and be a manager and a leader. So yeah, this little cartoon sums it up. Clearly, this guy was doing his job. He wasn't seeing the bigger picture. He was digging his moat where he thought it had to be, but he just couldn't see the bigger picture. So clearly some project manager needed to be fired in our little cartoon here. So that's it for me, guys. I think thank you for your time. Thank you for putting up with me. I hope you got something out of that. And if there's any questions, over to you, Tom or SEG team. Tom, you've fallen asleep.
Sorry, I couldn't unmute it. Thank you, though. That was very good. Great talk. Thank you very much. So who has questions? I don't know what the best way to do this is, whether you post them in the chat, or I think if you can raise your hand or something like that, and then unmute and ask a question.
Tom, there is a question on the chat. I think we can take those while everyone else formulates their question in mind, and then they can raise their hand.
Okay. Do you want to read it out?
Okay, sure. So there is a question from Tabang saying, afternoon, which course would you recommend for someone who wants to venture into consulting, economic valuation or investment? So he's given option PM, MSc, or MBA.
Great question, Tabang. Sure, I'm not sure I can answer that, having not done my PM or my MBA. I have done my MS3, my MSc through the Wits Economic Geology course that Judith Kinnaird was running. I don't think it really matters, to be honest. I think any post, you know, just keep learning and just keep studying, keep bettering yourself, and that. So I don't know that I can answer that question. I'm sorry, not having done an MBA or a project PM. You know, I think they're all valuable. Into consulting, economic valuation, investment. Sure. Yeah, I don't know. I think they're all great. If you can afford an MBA, I've seen the guys who've done MBA just absolutely fly. And if you can afford the time and the resources allocated to that, yeah. And I must say the Wits MSc has been great. You can do it while you're working. It's not too hectic. You can do it on the side. I personally got a lot out of it. That was really quite technical, less focused on project management and more on actual ore genesis, ore formation, etc. Yeah, so I'm an MBA, but anyway, I think they're all good. Hope that helps.
You can go, Tom.
I didn't know if you were going to talk. Are there any more questions that you found that I missed?
We just have some comments from Roy Irvin, who said the SAMCO's website is a great source of information of what needs to be captured during different phases of a mining project, and that you don't be afraid to ask people on your project who have done this before. Okay, so there are plenty in South Africa. Let's see if there's anything else. Oh, someone asked, Lovisa asked, how long is the metallurgy test work phase usually?
It's a great question. It's months, a significant amount of months. So 3, 6, 8, 12 months. And the reason being is that they assay everything, right? And assays take time, as you guys know. So they assay your sample when it arrives, then they do something and they assay the what's left over and they assay what they produced, and then they do it again and again and again. So they assay everything. So it takes ages. Yeah, so months and months.
Okay. Thanks, Richard. And then we have another question. Oh, there's a bunch of comments coming in. From Dakalo asking, is the standard for a representative sample for geotech, or is it a personal confidence standard?
Is there a standard? Is there a standard for representative sample for geotech? So again, your geotech sample, and it's the same for your metallurgical sample. Your sampling needs to represent. Firstly, the sample needs to represent the geology and what is going to be mined. So, what are you trying to achieve with your sampling? Are you you know, and your geotech consultant will guide you on this. But to answer your question, it's you don't normally sample across rock types or across lithologies, and it needs to, you sample into the hanging wall and you sample into the footwall. So it has to be representative of what's going to be mined.
Okay, thank you. And then I think we've got another one. Oh, so Alton asks, can the stock market prices affect the PM workflow?
Yes, I'd love to say no, but it does. And I mean, the golden rule, we should all know this in investing, is buy low and sell high. And what do all the mining companies do? When commodity prices are low, they sell all the assets, and when commodity prices are high, they buy assets. And in the exploration markets, very much so. You know, you're busy exploring for nickel, for example, and all of a sudden the stock market crashes, and you can often, and it'll affect your funding. Your funding can often dry up. So unfortunately, it does. But actually, your question is, does it affect the project management workflow? Yes, it does, and you are susceptible to it. So I've presented an ideal scenario here, but you often are at the whims of shareholders who want quick returns on their capital. They may influence your exploration program to drill for high-grade intersections as opposed to just trying to define the overall resource, if that makes sense.
Okay, thanks, Richard. And then another one we've got from Roy asking, do you believe that the use of portable XRF units can significantly speed up the sample analysis process for certain metals?
Yes, again, I think it depends what you're trying to do. I mean, I wouldn't use an XRF for resource definition. You know, and you're not going to put confidence in your quantitative analysis. But for example, if you at your early stage exploration program, I think an XRF can be a PXRF can be very valuable in helping you make decisions on the fly, as it were, just helping to guide your exploration program rather than so they play a role. But I don't believe they play a role in resource definition, but they play a role in guiding and focusing your exploration program.
Okay, thanks. I don't know if anyone else may have a question. If you want to put up your hand, or if there's a comment. Please feel free to send it through or ask away.
Hi, I have a question.
Hi, Tejo. Sure.
Hi. Hi, Richard. Thank you. What a great presentation. I see you've been around for a while with those projects that you did in 2011, and I just wanted to find out how has like the technological advancements in the industry actually changed the way you look at what you do, and how have you adapted technology into your approach for project management and for exploration? Thanks.
Okay, it's a great question. I think there's well, from a day-to-day basis, and we're currently doing some drilling out near Klerksdorp, and what's incredible is that the geologists there can load stuff on Dropbox, and it appears magically on my computer. So that's, I think, it's certainly helped to streamline workflows. Just on what we've seen, just the technological advances in the last, let's just say, 24 months, even with lockdown, having meetings like this, etc. That's also applicable to workflows on exploration projects. In terms of technological advances in actual project development, I mean, a lot of the stuff there are stuff like PXRF that are helping us go quicker. And I think the real advances will be on metallurgical processing, on mining, etc. Yeah, I hope that answers your question. I look forward to a future where we've got mechanized mining, safer. You can pay laborers better wages, have them sitting in a safe machine, air-conditioned machine underground, away from the slope face. Yeah, I'm not sure, and I think from an exploration point of view, I mean, there's incredible software out there, like Leapfrog, and just stuff that helps you make decisions on the fly. The desktop computing is a whole lot better. Access to Google Earth, to satellite imagery is quicker. That also, all these little things kind of add up. And also in terms of remote sensing, Aster imagery is free. All these kind of things. So it's becoming cheaper, quicker, to process and more available to junior explorers. I hope that answers your question, Sekho.
Thank you. Yeah, very, very, very good answer. Thanks.
Okay, and then we've got a bit of a question as well from Musa asking, how does the digitization of the geological data going to help junior to medium-sized mining companies in terms of access to the primary exploration data? Will it bring about some appetite in the market?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, if we compare ourselves to the Canadians, in Canada, you've got you file all the exploration results with the Canadian Geological Survey of Canada, and when you've got, and that data all becomes public domain after a couple of years. South Africa, we suffer from this mindset of closing up and lack of collaboration between mining companies and explorers, etc. So I think it's quite exciting. I'm not sure if Musa is referring to some of the advances with exploration data going to Council for Geoscience. I think that's hugely valuable. And the more data, the more exploration data that's available, and the more transparent, I think that'll really spur on exploration and mining development in South Africa.
Thanks, Richard. And then we've got a one from Mandy Jane, who says, thank you for the informative talk. Students are taught some of the theory at various stages of the geology degree, but in terms of learning the practical application on the job, how well do companies train their junior or graduate geologists to handle projects, and how long does it take to become competent to lead a project at senior level in terms of qualification or experience?
Sure, it's quite a question. So there's two questions there. How well do companies train their junior graduate geologists to handle projects? I think it differs. Some of the companies do an exceptionally good job. You know, like I know at Anglo they had their blast program, etc., and it was an amazing program. I think generally I would like to think that geologists typically look after the juniors under them and train them and are eager to pass on their knowledge. I would hope so. I think the work so it's a difficult question for me to answer because I've been with Mbono for 15 years, so I haven't really had exposure to what's happening recently with other companies. And then how long does it take to become competent? How long does it take to become competent to lead a project as a senior in terms of experience or qualification? Look, I think that everyone should cut their teeth looking after drill rig, logging core, and getting exposure to just seeing as many different rocks as possible. So yeah, I would say it's you're going to be sort of 5 years as an exploration geologist before moving into like a project geologist where you're starting to understand all these various aspects. But if you started your career, it's just what I'm trying to get across is pay attention to all these other stuff that happen in the background and that you might not think is important, such as the geotech, the metallurgy, the mining, etc. Even the social stuff. If you start your career as a exploration geologist and a project geologist or whoever has to go meet with the community, go along, get exposure to that. Just try to get exposure to as many of these modifying factors as possible.
Thanks, Richard. I definitely agree with Mandy. We've heard these things in lectures, and so your talk was quite informative, bringing it into action, into what's happening in the industry. And we've got another question. This is from Musa saying, what are some of the toughest social issues you have encountered while leading a project?
How long is a piece of string? Yeah, it's actually, you know what it is? I think it's simple. Is that there's a lack of leadership at a tribal authority. So I'm speaking from a South African perspective now. Firstly, there's a lack of leadership at various tribal authorities, and second thing is the expectations on the community that the mine will solve all the community problems, and the expectation is that the mine will fill the gaps that government is not filling, when I say the mine, exploration companies, etc., is enormous. So yeah, I hope that answers that question. That we find that government, rightly or wrongly, is placing a burden on mining companies to fulfill the gap in service delivery that we're so accustomed to here in South Africa. So the expectations from communities on when I use mining companies, I'm including exploration companies, is enormous. So it's so key to manage those expectations. And you go into communities where there's 40,000 people. The mine cannot employ all those people, and you need to make that clear. And so what I would say is that the community, you need to use that that mineral resource to act as a catalyst to try bring the community out of to try better the community by using their own resources. I hope that makes sense.
Okay, thanks, Richard. And then I know Peace had his hand up a while ago, so I think he has a question or a comment.
Yeah, I do have a comment. Thanks, Richard, for the wonderful talk. I just wanted to ask one simple question. I hope it's simple. I know with project management comes a lot of responsibility, and I was just wondering from a personal level, how do you keep track of everything that's going on with your project? Like, how do you do that? How do you not forget that you have to submit certain things, and how do you really keep track of that? Do you have any specific tools that you'd suggest to students, early career geoscientists to use?
Yeah, I do, guys. So it's a great question, and fortunately, we're blessed with technology. I rely heavily on technology personally. So I keep everything in my diary. I keep, if I've got to do something, I set a deadline in Outlook or something like that in my calendar. And a notebook. I use an iPad, and it's a beautiful device, but a notebook is just as good. Every single meeting I go to, I take my notebook with me and I make notes because I've got a horrible memory. So yeah, yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Thank you.
I like what Richard mentioned. I've also got a bad memory, so I have lists of, it's either on the phone or diary, and making sure you tick it off and set your goals for the day. Very, very helpful stuff. I don't know if there's any other comments or questions from anyone. Okay. We have had quite a lot of comments, Richard, saying thank you for the very informative talk, and they've learned a lot, and people are looking forward to more talks. So
cool. And feel free to share this talk. Just PDF it or yeah. So happy. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, and thank you for taking time off to educate us and give us some insight into the whole project management, because like it's been mentioned, we hear these things in lectures, and it's only when we hear from someone who's had the experience in the industry do we really get a better idea of what's happening. So thank you for that.
It's a pleasure. Anytime.
Thank you very much, Richard. That was excellent. Really, really good.
Okay. I think I don't think there is any other questions coming through at the moment. But I'm sure if anyone wants to send through to SAS-SEG or BTG, if they do have questions, later on thinking about the talk, I think they're more than welcome to. I'm sure Richard will be more than happy to answer them after this. Okay, I don't know if Peace wants to, Peace or Tom, if you want to.
I just want to say that thank you very much, everybody who turned up. And if we do have some professionals in the audience who would like to take on mentoring, BTG can do that. But thank you very much, Richard. And thank you, everyone who attended this talk for coming through. And we look forward to the next talk. Cheers.
Definitely. Thanks, guys. And yep, as P said, you guys should subscribe to the SAS-SEG mailing list to keep a track of what's happening with SAS-SEG, and for BTG as well. You can follow us on our social media platforms. And if you're keen on mentoring or being a mentee as part of the project, we're more than happy to have you. So, and I don't know if you can see my name, which is the BTG email. So you can always pop us an email there as well. Okay, I think that's it.
Awesome. Thank you, guys.
Okay,
Thank
thank
you.
you.